Papa.
I can talk now.
I love you.
The wind across the high plains of Montana Territory in 1887 carried the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. But in the town of Dust Creek, it mostly smelled of failure and yesterday's beans. Jeremiah Callahan sat on the warped porch of the half-finished church, whittling a piece of pine while the sun bled out behind the jagged Rockies. At 38, he was still broad through the shoulders and narrow through the hips, the way a man stays when he works cattle from first light till the last dog is fed. His face was sun-cracked leather, eyes the color of strong coffee, and his left hand bore 3 missing fingers from a rope accident that should have killed him. It hadn't. Jer figured God had kept him alive for one last chore, raising his daughter, and maybe, just maybe, giving the town something worth waking up for, besides whiskey and regret. Dust Creek had everything a western town needed, except bread. No proper bread. The last baker had died of lung fever 2 winters back, and what passed for loaves now came from Widow Hargrove's brick oven. Dense, sour things that sat in the stomach like cannonballs. Men complained, women sighed, and children learned early that life was hard and biscuits were better than nothing. Jer wanted more than nothing. He wanted the smell of fresh yeast and golden crust rolling down Main Street at dawn. He wanted laughter in the mornings instead of the endless scrape of boots headed to the saloon or the range. Most of all, he wanted his daughter to speak again. Little Hannah Callahan, 9 years old, sat beside him on the porch steps, knees drawn up under a faded blue calico dress. Her hair was the color of new wheat, braided tight so the wind couldn't steal it. She hadn't spoken a word since the day her mother, Clara, was buried 3 years earlier, shot dead by a drunk cattle rustler who mistook the Callahan buckboard for someone else's. The doctor in Helena said it was trauma. The preacher said it was God's will. Jer said nothing at all. He just kept talking to her every night like she might answer tomorrow. Tonight, he tried again. Found another advertisement in a territorial enterprise, Jer said, pulling a crumpled newspaper clipping from his vest pocket. Widow lady from Illinois. Calls herself a master baker. Makes rye, sourdough, even them fancy French things with the holes. Says she ain't afraid of rough country. He smoothed the paper on his thigh. Name's Eleanor Voss, 32, no children. Looking for a fresh start and a place to open her own shop. Hannah looked up at him. Her eyes, Clara's eyes, were solemn and dark. She reached out and touched the clipping with one small finger, then nodded once. That was her language now. Nods, head shakes, the way she squeezed his hand twice for yes and once for no. Jer sighed. I wired her 3 weeks ago. She's coming on the stage next Tuesday, God willing. Says she'll stay at the boarding house first, see if the town suits her. I told her the truth. No bakery building yet, just a empty lot beside the livery and my promise to help build it. Reckon that's enough? Hannah shrugged, then pointed toward the distant hills where their small ranch lay. She made a circle with her hands, the sign she used for home. Yeah, darlin'. We'll make it home for her too if she'll have us. Jer's voice roughened. I ain't looking for a wife, Hannah. Not really. Just someone who can bake. Someone who can make this town smell like hope again. He was lying, and they both knew it. The loneliness in him had grown teeth. Nights were too long, mornings too quiet, but he would never force it. If Eleanor Voss wanted only business, then business it would be. The next days passed in a blur of hammer and sweat. Jer and half a dozen ranch hands cleared the lot, hauled lumber from the sawmill 20 miles away, and raised rough walls while the wind tried to tear everything down. Hannah worked beside them, carrying nails in a little leather pouch and handing tools without being asked. The men treated her like a good luck charm. No one mentioned her silence anymore. It had become part of the weather in Dust Creek, something you accepted or moved on from. Tuesday arrived under a sky the color of gunmetal. The stage from Helena rolled in at dusk, wheels caked in alkali dust, horses lathered. Jer stood on the boardwalk in his best shirt, hat in hand, heart hammering harder than it had during the cattle stampede of '84. Hannah stood half hidden behind his leg, clutching his trousers. The stage door opened. Eleanor Voss stepped down. She was taller than he expected, maybe 5'8", with strong shoulders and capable hands. Her hair was a deep auburn pinned up under a sensible gray bonnet. Her traveling dress was practical dark blue, but the apron she wore over it, spotless white with tiny embroidered wheat stalks, told the real story. Her eyes were green as new grass after rain, and they scanned the town with quiet assessment rather than fear. "Mr. Callahan?" Her voice carried the faint lilt of the Midwest, steady and warm. "Ma'am." Jer touched his hat brim. "Welcome to Dust Creek. This here's my daughter, Hannah." Eleanor crouched immediately, bringing herself eye level with the girl. "Hello, Hannah. I hear you like to help build things. That true?" Hannah studied her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "Good. I'm going to need strong helpers if I'm to open a bakery before the snow flies." Eleanor smiled, and something in Jer's chest shifted like a locked door cracking open. He showed her the boarding house, then the lot. Eleanor walked the foundation lines, testing the ground with the toe of her boot, asking questions about water, firewood, and morning sun. She approved of the placement. When she learned Jer had already ordered a proper brick oven from a mason in Virginia City, she actually laughed. A rich, surprised sound that made several passers-by turn their heads. "You don't waste time, Mr. Callahan." "Jer," he said. "Just Jer. Jer, then." She met his eyes directly. "I left Illinois because my husband died, and the bank took the shop. I won't be pitied, and I won't be rushed. But I do make the best cinnamon raisin bread west of the Mississippi. If you can give me a fair chance, I'll give this town bread worth dying for." They shook on it. Her grip was firm, calloused in all the right places. The first week was all work. Eleanor moved into the half-built bakery by the end of it, sleeping on a cot behind a canvas curtain. She taught Hannah how to knead dough, showing her the rhythm, push, fold, turn, like a dance. The girl watched with fierce concentration. Jer brought them supper each night: venison stew, beans, coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. They ate together on crates, lantern light flickering, while Eleanor told stories of Chicago bakeries and riverboat mornings. Hannah never spoke, but she smiled more. Jer caught himself watching Eleanor's hands as she shaped loaves, the graceful strength in her wrists, and he had to look away. Trouble came on the 8th day, the way trouble always does in the West. A man named Silas Crowe rode into town with 6 hard cases. Crowe was a cattle baron from the south end of the valley, the kind who believed the Daw range belonged to whoever could hold it with bullets. He wanted the water rights along Bitter Creek, and the small ranchers, including Jer, were in his way. He had already burned 2 homesteads. Now he wanted to send a message. They found Jer at the bakery site, hammering shingles. "Callahan," Crowe drawled from the saddle. "Heard you're building a damn cake house. Softening up, are you?" Jer set the hammer down slowly. "Just trying to feed folks, Silas. No crime in that." Crowe spat. "There is when it distracts men from selling their land to me. You got 24 hours to convince your neighbors to sign, or we'll see how well bread bakes when the whole street's on fire." The riders laughed. One of them, a scar-faced man with dead eyes, leered toward the bakery door, where Eleanor and Hannah stood watching. Jer's hand drifted toward the Colt at his hip. "Don't," Eleanor said quietly from behind him. "Not yet." Crowe tipped his hat mockingly and rode out, dust trailing like a promise of violence. That night, Jer sat on the bakery steps with a rifle across his knees. Hannah was asleep inside on her cot. Eleanor brought him coffee and sat beside him, close enough that he could smell yeast and lavender on her skin. "You don't have to do this alone," she said. "I've been alone a long time, ma'am. So have I." She looked at the stars. "My husband was a good man, but weak when the bank came. I swore I'd never be weak again, and I won't stand by while good people lose everything." Jer glanced at her. "You planning on shooting Silas Crowe with a rolling pin?" She smiled faintly. "If I have to. But I'd rather feed the town so they remember what they're fighting for." They sat in silence after that. Comfortable silence, the kind that felt like the beginning of something. The next morning, something impossible happened. Jer was saddling his horse to ride out and warn the other ranchers when Hannah walked out of the bakery carrying a small loaf wrapped in cloth. She tugged his sleeve. He knelt. "What is it, darlin'?" Hannah looked at him with wide, determined eyes. Her lips moved. For the first time in 3 years, sound came out. Hoarse, small, but clear as church bells. "Papa, don't go alone." Jer froze. The world narrowed to his daughter's face. Tears he hadn't cried since the funeral burned his eyes. "Hannah." She nodded, then spoke again, stronger. "Miss Eleanor says, we fight together. Like bread. Many grains. 1 loaf." Eleanor stepped out behind her, hands dusted with flour, eyes shining. She hadn't prompted the girl. Hannah had chosen her own words. Jer pulled his daughter into his arms, crushing her against his chest. His shoulders shook. When he finally looked up at Eleanor, the question in his eyes needed no voice. She answered with a soft smile. "Looks like your town just got its first real baker, Jer. And maybe something more." Outside, the wind shifted. It no longer smelled only of sage and dust. It smelled of yeast, warm crust, and the faint sweet promise of cinnamon. But Silas Crowe's riders were still coming. And the real fight, the one that would decide whether Dust Creek got to keep its new heart, had only just begun. The words from Hannah's lips hung in the cool Montana dawn like a miracle no one in Dust Creek had dared pray for. "Papa, don't go alone." Jer Callahan held his daughter so tight he feared he might bruise her, but she only buried her face deeper into his shoulder. Eleanor Voss stood a respectful 3 paces back, her flour-dusted apron catching the first rays of sun filtering over the jagged peaks of the Rockies. The half-built, Bakery behind her smelled of fresh pine lumber and the faint promise of yeast. Jer finally released Hannah and rose, his missing fingers on his left hand flexing instinctively toward the colt at his hip. His voice came rough, cracked with 3 years of silence, finally broken. "You heard her, Miss Eleanor. We fight together, like bread." Eleanor's green eyes met his, steady as the river current. "Then let's build something worth fighting for, Jer. Starting with these walls, the next 10 days blurred into a rhythm of sweat, sawdust, and the steady thump of hammers." The bakery lot beside McCready's livery transformed from a scarred patch of alkali dirt into the skeleton of something permanent. Jer had measured it out at 32 feet wide by 48 feet deep. Room enough for a storefront, a large baking kitchen, a small storeroom, and living quarters in the back for Eleanor if she chose to stay beyond the trial month. They reinforced the River Rock foundation with wagon loads of crushed gravel from the Bitter Creek quarry. 2 local boys, twins named Caleb and Josiah Pike, mixed lime mortar in a wooden trough while Hannah stirred it with a stick longer than she was tall. The mortar had to set just right. Too wet and the walls would slump in the first rain. Too dry and they'd crack when the freeze came. Eleanor oversaw every batch, testing consistency with her experienced hands. "Feels like good pie crust dough," she told Hannah, demonstrating how to press a thumb into the mix. The girl nodded solemnly and mimicked her, her small voice whispering experiments. "More water. No, less." Each new word from Hannah was a gift Jer treasured like gold dust. The framing went up next, using rough-sawn ponderosa pine from the sawmill in the foothills. Jer and 4 ranch hands, grizzled veterans who'd ridden with him on drives to Abilene, raised the main posts on 12-inch square beams for the corners, sunk 4 feet into post holes lined with more rock to fight rot. Cross-bracing with diagonal 2x6s gave the structure wind resistance against the howling plains gales that could hit 60 miles an hour without warning. The roof rafters were spaced 16 inches on center, strong enough to hold heavy snow load come winter. They sheathed the walls with 1x12 boards, leaving gaps for the eventual clapboard siding Jer had ordered from Chicago on Eleanor's recommendation. "Insulation matters for a bakery," she explained one evening over coffee. "Keeps the heat in the oven where it belongs, not leaking out to the street." Inside, they framed out the baking heart of the place. The brick oven would sit against the north wall, massive and permanent. Jer had wired ahead to a mason in Virginia City who specialized in beehive ovens. The man arrived on day 7 with 2 apprentices and a wagon of fire bricks shipped all the way from St. Louis. They built a foundation platform of concrete mixed with horsehair for strength, an old trick the mason swore by. The oven itself rose in layers, a thick base, then the dome shaped over a sand form that would be scooped out later, the CI firebox below, the baking chamber above, with a flue system that would draw smoke out through a tall chimney stack piercing the roof. Eleanor tested the design with small test fires, noting how the bricks absorbed and radiated heat. "This will hold steady at 450 degrees for hours," she said, wiping sweat from her brow. "Perfect for sourdough and those long ferment ryes." While the men framed, Eleanor and Hannah worked the interior layout. Wide plank flooring of fir, sanded smooth so flour wouldn't catch in cracks. a long work table made from a single slab of maple Jer sourced from a trader, 8 feet long, 3 inches thick, perfect for kneading. Shelves along the east wall for proofing baskets and cooling racks. A small cast-iron stove for smaller batches and hot water. In the back, a partition created Eleanor's private quarters, a simple room with a rope bed, washstand, and window overlooking the hills toward the Callahan ranch. By the end of the second week, the building stood weather-tight enough for serious work. The town began to take notice. Women dropped by with jars of preserves and questions about pie crusts. Men grumbled good-naturedly about the woman's touch, softening their rough town, but bought extra nails and helped hoist beams anyway. Dust Creek hadn't smelled of fresh-cut lumber, and hope, in years. Evenings became sacred. After the crews left, Jer, Hannah, and Eleanor would sit on the new porch steps. Hannah spoke more now, short sentences at first, then longer ones, as if the dam had cracked and the river was rushing through. She told Eleanor about her mother Clara's garden, how the roses had died after the shooting. Eleanor listened without pity, sharing her own losses. A husband who drank away their Illinois bakery, creditors who took everything but her rolling pin and pride. Jer watched them, his heart a strange mix of joy and terror. He wanted Eleanor to stay more than he cared to admit. Her laughter when Hannah mispronounced baguette as baguette filled the empty spaces inside him. One night, as Hannah slept inside on her cot, Jer and Eleanor walked the quiet street. "You don't have to decide tonight," he said, hat in hand. "But the town needs you. Hannah needs you. Hell, I might too." Eleanor stopped under the lantern light outside the saloon. "I left Illinois running from ghosts, Jer. I won't run here. But I need to know this isn't charity or loneliness talking. I'm a baker first." He nodded. "Fair enough. Let's see what your bread does to this town." The first real bake happened on a Thursday when the oven was cured. Eleanor started the sourdough starter 3 days prior. Flour, water, wild yeast from the Montana air. At 3 a.m., she lit the firebox with pine and oak. By 5 a.m., the bricks glowed with retained heat. Hannah helped shape loaves, rustic rounds, long batards, and cinnamon raisin swirls that made the air smell like heaven. Jer delivered the first tray to the general store at opening. Old man Thibodeau bit into a warm slice and actually closed his eyes. Lord have mercy. This might be worth fighting Crowe over. Word spread faster than a prairie fire. By noon, a line stretched down Main Street. Eleanor sold out by 2 o'clock, pocketing real coin and something better. Goodwill. The preacher declared it a sign from above. The schoolmarm bought extra for her pupils. Even the saloon owner grumbled that his whiskey tasted better with bread to soak it up. But goodwill alone wouldn't stop bullets. Silas Crowe didn't wait long. On the 15th day after Eleanor's arrival, his riders returned. This time they came at dusk, 7 men on lathered horses, rifles loose in scabbards. Jer was nailing the final clapboards when they reined up. Crowe, a thick-necked man with a gray-streaked beard and eyes like chipped flint, leaned on his saddle horn. "Nice little playhouse, Callahan. Shame if it burned down with the baker lady inside." Jer kept his hammer steady. "You threatening women now, Silas? That's low even for you." One of Crowe's men, the scar-faced one called Dirk, spat. "We ain't threatening. We're promising. Sign over your water rights on Bitter Creek, or we ride through here like Sherman through Georgia." From inside the bakery, Eleanor stepped out with Hannah behind her. The girl clutched a small loaf like a shield. Eleanor's voice cut clear. "Gentlemen, I've got fresh bread cooling. Care for a slice before you make fools of yourselves?" The riders laughed, but Crowe's face darkened. He wasn't used to being mocked by a woman. "Cute, but bread don't stop lead, missy." Jer's hand hovered near his colt. Tension stretched like a rope about to snap. Then Hannah spoke, loud enough for all to hear. "My papa builds things. You only break them. Go away." The simple power of a child's voice, newly rediscovered, silenced the street. Even Crowe's horse shifted uneasily. For a moment, uncertainty flickered in the cattle baron's eyes. He wheeled his mount. 24 hours, Callahan. Then we settle this the old way." They rode out in a cloud of dust. That night, the town held a meeting in the half-finished church. Jer laid out the stakes. Crowe wanted control of the creek to expand his herds, squeezing out small ranchers. Selling meant leaving. Fighting meant blood. Men argued. Some wanted to sell and move on. Others, inspired by the new bakery and Hannah's courage, dug in. Eleanor spoke last. "I came here for a fresh start. Bread feeds bodies, but courage feeds souls. If we stand together, we can build more than one bakery. We can build a town worth keeping." Votes were cast. They would fight. The following week was a frenzy of preparation mixed with quiet moments that bound Jer, Hannah, and Eleanor closer. During the day, they fortified the bakery, reinforcing windows with shutters, digging a small root cellar for emergency supplies. Jer taught Eleanor basic gun handling behind the building at dawn. She was a quick study, her strong baker's hands steady on the revolver. Evenings, they shared meals. Eleanor baked experimental batches, herb focaccia using wild sage from the hills, potato rolls that used up the last of the winter stores. Hannah helped name them. Sage Defender Loaf for the one with extra rosemary. Laughter filled the kitchen. One night, after Hannah slept, Jer and Eleanor sat on the porch again. The stars wheeled overhead. "I ain't good with pretty words," Jer admitted. "Lost my way after Clara. But watching you bring my girl back, it's mending something I thought was broke forever." Eleanor reached over and took his calloused hand, missing fingers and all. "I didn't come looking for a husband, but I found a partner. Maybe more. Let's get through this Crowe mess first. Then we talk about the rest." Their first kiss was tentative, tasting of coffee and cinnamon, under a sky that felt infinite. The raid. It came 2 nights later, just before the deadline expired. Jer was at the ranch checking stock when he heard the shots. He rode hard into town, rifle in hand. The bakery was under attack, 4 of Crowe's men firing from cover, trying to torch the structure with kerosene rags on arrows. Eleanor and Hannah had barricaded inside. Gunfire cracked from the upper window where Eleanor had positioned herself. She winged one rider, forcing him to retreat. Jer charged in from the flank, using the livery for cover. His first shot dropped a horse, spilling its rider. Chaos erupted. Townsmen joined the fray. The preacher with an old shotgun, the storekeeper with a Navy Colt. Bullets whined off bricks. One grazed Jer's arm, burning like fire. Hannah's voice called out from inside, "Papa, we're okay." Dirk, the scar-faced man, made a desperate rush toward the door with a flaming brand. Eleanor met him on the porch, rolling pin in one hand, pistol in the other. She cracked the pin across his wrist, disarming the torch, then fired a shot that shattered his kneecap. He screamed and crawled away. The attackers broke and fled into the night, leaving 2 dead and 3 wounded. Dawn revealed the damage: scorched siding, broken glass, but the bakery stood. The oven inside was untouched. Eleanor's first act was to fire it up and bake. By mid-morning, the smell of victory bread, golden loaves studded with dried berries, wafted down Main Street. The town rallied stronger. More men pledged to form a defense committee. Messages went out to the territorial marshal, though help was days away. Jer bandaged his arm in the bakery kitchen while Hannah clung to his side, speaking steadily now. "We protected it, like you protected me." Eleanor changed his dressing with gentle efficiency. "This is what I left Illinois for, Jer. Not just bread. A place worth bleeding for." As tensions simmered, life continued. A traveling preacher held services on the bakery porch, using fresh bread for communion. Children learned math by helping weigh flour. A subplot unfolded with the Pike twins. Caleb had a crush on the schoolmarm and used extra bread deliveries as excuses to court her, leading to comedic moments amid the danger. Jer visited neighboring ranches, forging alliances. One grizzled homesteader, Old Pete, shared stories of Indian wars and offered his Sharps rifle for the coming fight. Eleanor experimented with local ingredients, incorporating chokecherries into tarts, wild honey into sweet rolls, turning the bakery into a symbol of adaptation and resilience. Hannah flourished. She began teaching other silent or shy children simple words through baking games. Her voice, though soft, carried authority, but Crowe wasn't finished. Scouts reported his main force, 20 hard men, gathering at his South Valley ranch. They planned a dawn assault on the entire town in 3 days. Jer, Eleanor, and the committee prepared. Barricades on Main Street, women and children sheltered in the bakery's reinforced cellar. Armed defenders positioned in the buildings. On the eve of battle, Jer proposed to Eleanor properly, not with flowers, but with a deed to half the ranch and a promise: "Build your empire here, with us." She accepted with tears and a fierce kiss. Hannah, witnessing it, smiled. Finally, the loaf is complete. As night fell, the bakery chimney smoked softly, sending the aroma of one last hopeful bake across Dust Creek. The West was harsh, but some things, love, courage, fresh bread, could rise even against the greatest odds. The final confrontation loomed, and with it, the fate of everything they had built. Dawn broke over Dust Creek like a blacksmith's hammer on hot iron, harsh, unforgiving, and streaked with the blood-red promise of violence. The 3rd day since Silas Crowe's ultimatum had arrived. 20 hard men from his South Valley ranch were reported massing 5 miles out, armed with Winchesters, revolvers, and a hatred for anyone who stood between them and the Bitter Creek water rights. Jeremiah Callahan stood on the roof of the newly completed bakery, spyglass to his eye, his bandaged left arm throbbing from the earlier raid. The missing fingers on that hand itched, as they always did before a fight. Below him, Main Street had transformed into a makeshift fortress. Barricades of wagons, hay bales, and stacked lumber blocked both ends of the dusty thoroughfare. Men from every small ranch within 20 miles, 32 in total, held positions in doorways, on rooftops, and behind the half-built church. The women and children, including Hannah, were sheltered in the bakery's reinforced root cellar, stocked with Eleanor's emergency loaves. Water, and blankets. The air already carried the scent of fresh bread from the brick oven firing since 3 a.m. Eleanor had insisted on one last bake before hell arrived. "They'll remember what they're fighting for," she had said, kneading dough with those strong, flour-dusted hands. Jer climbed down the ladder as Eleanor stepped onto the porch, apron swapped for a practical leather vest over her calico dress, a borrowed Colt holstered at her hip. Her auburn hair was pinned tight, green eyes sharp with resolve. Hannah peeked from the doorway, clutching a small loaf wrapped in cloth like a talisman. "Scouts say they'll hit at full light," Jer said quietly. "Crow's leading them himself this time. No more warnings." Eleanor nodded, glancing toward the cellar stairs where Hannah had retreated. "Then we give them bread and bullets. In that order, if possible." She touched Jer's arm, the one that wasn't wounded. Their kiss the night before lingered between them unspoken, a promise sealed under starlight after he had properly proposed, with a simple gold band salvaged from his late wife's things and a half share in the ranch. "Whatever comes, Jer, this town rose with that oven. And so did we." Hannah's voice drifted up from below, stronger now after weeks of practice. "Papa, Miss Eleanor, the dough is rising. Don't let them burn it." Jer smiled despite the knot in his gut. His daughter's words were the real miracle. 3 years of silence shattered by a baker's patience and kindness. He ruffled her hair when she joined them briefly. "We won't, darling. You stay safe down there. Help the other kids." The waiting stretched like a taut lariat. Townsfolk shared the fresh sourdough rounds Eleanor passed around, crusty outside, airy within, flavored with wild Montana sage. It steadied hands and spirits. Old Pete, the grizzled homesteader with the Sharps rifle, bit into his slice and grunted. "Tastes like freedom. Crow's boys never had bread like this. Soft living made 'em mean." As the sun crested the Rockies, dust clouds appeared on the southern horizon. Hoofbeats thundered. Silas Crowe's force rode in hard, 20 riders fanning out, rifles glinting. Crowe himself, thick-necked and bearded, raised a hand to halt them 50 yards from the barricades. His scar-faced Lieutenant Dirk rode beside him, legs still bandaged from Eleanor's shot in the previous raid. "Last chance, Callahan," Crowe bellowed, voice echoing off the false front buildings. "Sign the creek rights over, burn that damn cake shop, and we ride out peaceful. Otherwise, we ride through you." Jer stepped forward atop the wagon barricade, rifle steady. "You had your chance, Silas. This town's got roots now, bread roots. We ain't sellin'." A shot rang out from Crowe's side. Dirk, impatient. It splintered wood near Jer's boot. That was the spark. Chaos erupted. The battle for Dust Creek exploded in a roar of gunfire and shouting. Jer dropped behind cover and returned fire, his Colt barking as riders charged the barricades. Bullets whined through the air like angry hornets. One of Crowe's men tumbled from his saddle, hit by the preacher's old shotgun. Another horse screamed and went down, pinning its rider. From the bakery roof, Eleanor fired with cool precision. Her baker's hands, trained for perfect loaves, proved deadly steady on the trigger. She winged 2 attackers trying to flank from the livery side. "For the bread!" she shouted, reloading swiftly. Inside the cellar, Hannah kept the younger children calm by telling stories her mother once shared, passing out small bread pieces. "Miss Eleanor says dough rises even in the dark," she whispered. "So do we." The fight surged back and forth for nearly an hour. Crowe's superior numbers pressed hard. 3 townsmen fell wounded. Jer took a grazing shot to his side that burned like fire, but didn't slow him. He led a counter-charge with 5 ranch hands, driving back a group trying to torch the general store. Old Pete's sharps boomed like cannon fire, dropping Crowe's best gunmen at 200 yards. Then came the turning point. Dirk, fueled by revenge, led a desperate rush straight at the bakery. 3 men on foot, torches lit. "Burn the witch and her bread," he roared. Eleanor met them on the porch again, this time with Jer at her side. She fired once, dropping 1 torch carrier. Jer's rifle cracked, felling another. Dirk lunged at Eleanor with a knife, but Hannah, defying orders, darted from the doorway and swung a heavy rolling pin with all her 9-year-old strength. It connected with Dirk's injured knee. He howled and stumbled. Jer finished it with a punch that laid the scar-faced man out cold. "Enough!" Jer shouted toward Crowe, who was rallying his remaining men. "Your fight's lost, Silas. The marshal's riders are coming. We wired days ago. Turn back now or die here." Crowe's face twisted in rage, but his force was broken. Half his men were down or fleeing. A final volley from the defenders sealed it. Crowe himself took a bullet to the shoulder from Eleanor's pistol. He cursed, wheeled his horse, and galloped south with the survivors, dust trailing like a defeated banner. Silence fell, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the crackle of a few small fires, quickly extinguished. Dust Creek had held. Cheers rose as men embraced. Jer limped to Eleanor and Hannah, pulling them both into a fierce hug amid the settling gun smoke. "We did it," he rasped. "Together." Eleanor's eyes shone with tears and triumph. "The oven's still hot. Let's feed them." The next weeks healed Dust Creek in body and spirit. The territorial marshal arrived with a small posse, arrested the captured raiders, and issued warrants for Crowe, who fled deeper into the territories and was never seen again in Montana. Water rights disputes went to formal arbitration. The small ranchers kept their shares. The bakery became the undisputed heart of the town. Eleanor's bread empire expanded. She hired 2 local girls as assistants and taught Hannah advanced techniques, laminated pastries, fruit tarts with chokecherries, even a special victory loaf studded with nuts and honey that became a regional legend. Orders came from Helena and Virginia City. The scent of yeast and cinnamon drifted down Main Street every dawn, drawing travelers and settlers. The half-built church was completed with donations funded partly by bakery profits. Weddings, town meetings, and school lessons all featured Eleanor's goods. Jer and Eleanor married on a crisp October morning in front of the bakery. Hannah stood as flower girl and witness, speaking her vows for the family in a clear, proud voice. "We are one loaf now." The ceremony was simple. Preacher, fresh bread for communion, and a fiddler playing old trail songs. Jer wore a new black coat, Eleanor a white dress with embroidered wheat stalks. Their kiss tasted of shared survival and rising hope. Life on the ranch blended with town duties. Jer split time between cattle and helping expand the bakery into a full cafe with tables out front. Hannah thrived in school, her silence a distant memory. She wrote stories about the baker who gave voices back. Evenings, the family sat on the porch, Jer whittling, Eleanor planning new recipes, Hannah reading aloud. The loneliness that once gnawed at Jer was gone replaced by the steady rhythm of dough rising and love deepening. Winter came hard, as Montana winters do, but the bakery's oven warmed the community. Strangers became neighbors. Dust Creek grew from a failing outpost into a thriving stop on the westward trail, known not for saloons or gunfights, but for the best bread west of the Mississippi. Years later, when travelers asked about the legend of the silent girl who spoke and the baker who saved a town, old-timers would point to the sturdy bakery with its tall chimney and say, all Jer Callahan wanted was bread. What he got was a family, a future, and a reason to fight. That's the West for you, harsh as alkali dust, sweet as fresh crust. The wind across the plains still carried sage and rain, but now it mingled forever with the aroma of yeast, cinnamon, and second chances.